Hello. In the extremely likely event that you're new to this channel, my name's Andy. I am the Feral Mood Reader, and today I'm going to be talking about the books I DNF'd in January, the books I finished in January, and what my TBR for February looks like. So let's get into it. January was rough. I had a reading slump like no other. I'm only going to mention a couple of books that I DNF'd because otherwise we'd be here all day. And the first book that I DNF'd was called Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake. I think that's how you say it. It's spelled like Olivia, but with an I at the end instead of an A. Anyway, my main problem with Girl Dinner was this book could not decide what it wanted to be. Was it satire? Was it lit fic? Was it horror? Was it all of them? It ended up being really bad at all of them. And and by the time it got to the 50% mark, it started to get weird. But the problem was it didn't get weird in an interesting way, at least not to me. And I won't give you any spoilers for what the exact weirdness element is in case you want to read this book, but I would not personally recommend that one. The other book that I DNF'd is one that I mentioned in my first video, which was Blade by Wendy Walker. This was a mystery slash thriller about a 15-year-old girl accused of murdering her male ice skating coach at an elite academy for Olympic hopefuls in the sport of figure skating. My grandma loved professional figure skating. I went to some exhibitions as a kid. I was hoping to really like this book. The author, Wendy Walker, was a professional figure skater herself at one point, but did not ever reach the Olympic level. The other character in the book is the girl's attorney who used to be a skater at the same academy. I just couldn't I just couldn't get into this one. It did that weird thing where some of the thrillers sometimes do, where one chapter is about 10 or 20 pages, and then the next chapter is 3 or 4 pages of court testimony or a deposition transcript or an interview transcript or something, and I was like, "Why could we have not combined the chapters?" So it was just really hard for me to pick up every day. So I ended up DNFing that one. And starting with next, we're getting into the books that I finished in January. We're going to start with the worst and work our way up to the best. There were a couple that I did not rate in January, and I'll get to explain why in a moment. Um, the first book that I read in this countdown is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I don't have my physical copy, had to return it to the library. I liked the relationship between Dr. Manette and his daughter Lucy, like I mentioned in my first video. I found them both to be really interesting, really relatable characters. I love the father daughter dynamic. Problem was Charles Darnay. Even though he was eventually Lucy's husband and the love interest, I just found him to be what I would call aggressively bland. He's one of those, "Oh, I have a mysterious past, but I refuse to elaborate on it. But I'm going to marry the heroine anyway, and she's never going to question my mysterious past, and no one else in her life is either, not even Dr. Manette." And so that's why I had a really hard time with this book, because you're supposed to care about Charles, and I just didn't. However, I will say that the audiobook version by performed by Martin Jarvis on Audible was incredible, and that was the reason that this book did not end up on my DNF list. I really liked his performance. I also liked his performance on A Night to Remember by Walter Lord, which is a nonfiction book about the Titanic. So I listened to that and was able to complete the book. Next up, we have No Plan B by Andrew and Lee Child. This is part of the Jack Reacher series. I found that Weirdly for me, I like Jack Reacher, the TV show, a lot better than I do the books. Honestly, the side character in this book, Jed, who is a teenager in foster care who's going cross country on his own to visit his father when his father gets out of prison and takes some money from his foster mom, doesn't really know where he's going or how he's going to get there, or if his father will even accept him when he gets to the prison. I found him much more engaging than the main plot with Jack Reacher. Would still recommend the book and gave it 3.5 stars, but just know that if you're not a super fan of Jack Reacher, you may find yourself like me, wishing the book had been all about Jed. Next up, we have Sworn to Silence by Linda Castillo. Um, this is the first book in the Kate Burkholder mystery series. And if you know anything about mystery and thriller series, they can have a lot of books in them. So, my personal rule for series, especially police procedurals or anything in that genre, is I will not proceed with the series if the first book is not at least a 3.5 star. This was a 3.75-star read for me. Our main character, Kate Burkholder, had a traumatic event happen to her when she was in her early teens. And partly due to that traumatic event, and partly because of other things that happened during her life, she decided that she was not going to be baptized into the Amish church that the rest of her family belonged to. She ended up moving to Columbus, Ohio, where she got a job as a police dispatcher, eventually became a police officer and a detective, and then she came back to her small town of Painter's Mill to serve as the chief of police. And she's kind of an important liaison in the town because she can speak Pennsylvania Dutch. She understands the Amish culture, even though been she's been shunned for not being baptized. And when I say this is a small town police force, if you've ever read anything by C.J. Box or the Walt Longmire series by Craig Johnson, or even Peter Benchley's Jaws, you know what I mean. There are four cops in the entire town, including her. And so when these young women start turning up murdered in this town, the police chief ends up getting help from a detective from the state police named John Tomasetti. And the general feeling is that she's not equipped to handle the serial murders because um, things like that don't happen here in rural Ohio, but they absolutely do. And I found Kate to be a very interesting main character. I really liked the incorporation of the Amish culture into the storyline. We listen and we don't judge. I used to be a fan of Breaking Amish. I watched that show with my mom every Sunday night. So I recognized some of the tropes and the words and the cultural norms of that community. And so I really enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to reading the next one. I already mentioned in my previous video that the first book I finished in 2025 was The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. I have finished that and gave it a 4.25 star, which is the same rating that I gave the first book in the trilogy. And Millie is just unhinged fun. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what she gets up to in the third and final installment of the trilogy. Next up, we have All Bad Things by Tom King. This is part two of a graphic novel duology about Oswald Chesterfield Cobblepot, aka the Penguin from Batman. And this is all about how Oswald faked his own death. His twin children have taken over his crime empire. He doesn't like what they're doing, so he decides to come out of hiding and basically deal with the problem. There is As my favorite penguin of all time, Robin Lord Taylor, said, there is betrayal and savagery. It's just a really good kind of dark mafia-ish graphic novel with an appearance by Batman. I gave it 4.5 stars. Slightly out of order because I forgot that I don't have my physical copy of this. I returned it to the library. Is Venom Abyss by by Donny Cates. This is a Marvel graphic novel based around the character Eddie Brock, aka Venom, who is more or less a man being possessed by an alien symbiote. And he has bonded to this entity and he hears its voice in his head constantly. And part of what happens in this book is that Eddie gets injured and some things happen to him, and he stops hearing Venom's voice in his head. And Venom has been a presence in his life for literal years at this point. And so he just gets really depressed and really angry about it. And he also finds out that he might have a much younger half brother. And so he's kind of dealing with all those emotions. And one of the things that I liked about this book was there were just some profound moments that almost didn't belong there, but they weren't. They were really profound. Some of those. There was a quote about love that I actually wrote down in my reading journal while I was reading this book. Now, bear in mind, again, this is not a romance novel. This is about a man who is essentially being possessed by an alien. The quote is, when you love someone, when your lives are tied together, your bodies share the happiness you create. Both of you become a hive mind of the joy and the laughter, big things and the small. Everything the two of you do goes into that same shared place. As a married woman, that line gave me goosebumps. So I would highly recommend that you read this novel, even if you're not a big graphic novel person, which I am not. I read two this month because that was my theme for book club, which ended up getting canceled because of the snowmageddon that we had down here in the South. But that's another story. I rated that book 4 stars, and would highly recommend it. Last but not least, we have January's sleeper hit, George R. Martin's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I am not an epic fantasy reader. That's really not my preferred genre, but my husband really wants to watch the HBO adaptation of this book. So he said, "Well, let's just read the book beforehand. It's short. I think you'll enjoy the show a lot more if you understand what's going on in the first place." And I have to say, he was right. I really loved the mentor mentee dynamic between Dunk and Egg. It was really cute. The illustrations in this edition of the book are beautiful. It took me back to being a teenager, screaming at the Red Knight until I lost my voice at medieval times. So even if you're not an epic fantasy reader, it's less than 400 pages. And it's just a really good story about knights and chivalry and jousting and all kinds of fun things like that. Next are the two books that I will not be rating. One of them, I have a physical copy of it, I just can't find it at the moment. It's called Paranormal Kentucky by Mason Smith and Marie Mitchell. I always get their last names confixed. Sorry, guys, if you're watching. It's basically a book of Kentucky lore about ghosts and cryptids, a creature called the Goat Man that lives on a bridge down in Louisville, different things like that. Haunted abandoned hospitals like Waverly Hills, and a few other things of that nature. And the reason I am not reading this book is because I know the authors personally. Both of them were professors in when I was an undergrad. I took them for different subjects, loved both of their teaching styles. So that is the reason I'm not rating this book. If you're from Kentucky or you just like spooky, creepy monster lore, I would highly recommend that you read Paranormal Kentucky. The last book I am not rating for January is Cat Massage Therapy. This is the first manga I have ever read in my life. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the author's name because I don't want to butcher it. This is a very fun, light little palate cleanser of a book. It's about stressed out office workers in Japan who receive massage therapy from specially trained cats. You know how cats will knead you and make little biscuits on your back or on your leg or your arm? Well, that's what these cats are trained to do. And instead of calling them kittens, the other cats in the story refer to them as interns, which I just thought was really cute. And so I rate based on vibes. And since this was my first manga and I wasn't sure of the reading conventions, I've chosen not to rate it for that reason. I will just say that if you're feeling a little down in this gloomy weather, then uh, pick up cat massage therapy. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to discuss the books that I have on my TBR for February. The first I do not have a physical copy of, and that is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. My husband is a huge Tolkien nerd. He has been trying to get me into it for years and years, and confession, I never even saw the movies until last month. And we watched all the movies over the course of a couple of weekends, the director's cuts that my husband Nick owns, because he never does anything halfway. And so we watched those, and then we saw the Return of the King theatrical re-release, and I have emotionally imprinted on Samwise. Aragorn, played by Viggo Mortensen. Oh, he's just objectively an attractive man, but this girl's heart belongs to little Samwise. I would have drop kicked Gollum off the cliff long before Sammy ever did. And so my in-person book club at my local library is doing movies that were books first as our theme for February because of the upcoming Oscars, for which I am very excited for because of Sinners getting so many nominations. I saw Sinners twice when it was in theaters, listened to the soundtrack all the time. Best of luck to Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Coogler, everyone else involved in that movie. It was amazing. But anyway, I decided it was natural to decide to start reading Tolkien now that I've found out that I actually like the movies. So I will be listening to the version of The Fellowship that is narrated by Andy Serkis, aka Gollum slash Smeagol from the movies. And I'm really looking forward to starting to that here in a few days. The other something else on my February TBR that I don't have a physical copy of is a book called Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hockhauser. I got this as an advanced ebook copy from NetGalley. It is the story, according to what I know of the blurb, of Cinderella's stepmother, Lady Tremaine, who is always painted as the villain and just a terrible person. It's described as a feminist retelling of Lady Tremaine and her story and why some people would think she was a monster. Cinderella was always one of my favorite Disney movies growing up. My first favorite and forever favorite is Beauty and the Beast. My family members used to call me Belle because I always had a book in my hand anytime you would see me, and I learned to read at a really young age. So I am really looking forward to that Cinderella retelling. The next book on my February TBR is The Hunger by Alma Katsu. This is historical fiction slash horror, I guess you could call it. The blurb says evil is invisible and it is everywhere. That is the only way to explain the misfortunes that have plagued the wagon train known as the Donner Party. Depleted rations, quarrels, and the mysterious death of a little boy have driven the isolated travelers to the brink of madness. I love historical fiction. I've read a little bit here and there about the Donner Party. It sounds like it's right up my alley. Very creepy, very unsettling premise. If you know anything about the real historical Donner Party, it's even worse. So I'm looking forward to reading that as well as the winter weather will hopefully subside and not make me feel like I may be living some of the weather that they experienced. Last but not least for my February TBR is The Butcher and the Wren by Elena Urquhart, I think is how you pronounce it. She is the co-host of Morbid, a true crime podcast that I really love. This is a thriller novel that she has written about a serial killer in the Louisiana Bayou who is being pursued by a forensic pathologist. This book was a Christmas gift from my husband. Nick blindly picked it from a table of thrillers and mysteries at Barnes and Noble. He had no idea that I was a fan of Morbid. So I was so thrilled when he gave me this. I just thought it was a very, very sweet Christmas gift. And so, yeah, that's everything I'm planning on reading in February. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll come back. I plan to do another reading wrap up toward the end of February to let you know what I thought about all these books. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Stay feral, my friends. Bye.